What's up, everybody? Chris and Rob here from the Jersey Comic Crew, and today we are going to break down and review Masters of the Universe Revelations Part Deuce. And Rob, this was a lot different in some ways than what we got in Part 1. It was only like 5-ish episodes for Part 2, but I really want to know what you thought, because I have some kind of conflicting thoughts in my head right now.
So for Part 2 and the overall story, I guess, of He-Man, it's actually Masters of the Universe, thoroughly enjoyed it. I definitely feel like it's a show for old fans and new fans. I was able to jump into it with knowing next to nothing except He-Man, the character. He screams, he gets powers. Skeletor, he's a bad man, right? I didn't know anything. It took us into the journey explaining the lore of the world in modern day storytelling. The fight scenes were great, especially towards the end. Like, you can see they put good amount of the budget into it to get these slick animations, very similar to what we got in Castlevania and we see overseas in Japan in anime, right? The overall story, everybody becoming, like, there was like multiple people became master of the universe. Skeletor got his power in this series we saw, and this Evelyn betrays him because she's like, you have no dream, you have no desire, you're just a schmuck that wants to kill this guy. You're so one-dimensional.
It's so true.
Right? You're so one-dimensional, and I'm gonna change this and become more complex, right? She's like, I have things I want to do. And it's kind of like almost a comment on like old television versus new. Old He-Man, Skeletor just wants to kill He-Man. That's it. That's all the drive he needs. That's all the character development you needed back then in the 80s, right? Now, the audience requires more. We're like, okay, but why do you want to kill He-Man? What do you want to do when you do that? And his whole thing is like, I just want to kill He-Man. Mark Hamill, right? And she's like, nah, man, I'm taking this. I'm going to become buffed up sorcerer lady, which was really cool to see. And like everybody taking on the new mantle, right? The new master of the universe, the new man at arms, the new sorcerer of Castle Grayskull, the family connections. I really enjoyed it. I think it was a lot of fun.
It was fun. And I thought if you like kind of didn't like the first part of it, you would like this part better because it was more about He-Man and more like fight scenes. But if you like the first part of this, you might not like this one because there was way more story, I thought, fleshed out in Part 1. It was more focused. Obviously, Teela was the focus of Part 1. And she kind of got, like, her story felt a little rushed at the end, where it was just like, oh, by the way, this is her mother, and she's going to be the sorceress.
Oh, I do see that. Like, for me, Part 2 was more about, like, connecting all the threads that we set up in Part 1.
Totally.
But I do agree that connecting with her, the mother, and then Teela becoming the Grand Sorcerer Supreme, whatever you want to call her in this,
it's
right?
Like,
that was a little quick, but considering all the other stuff that was going on, I was fine that went quick because we got so much action and so much other connections to other things. Like He-Man turning into a Hulk without his sword. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Well, I think it is now. I don't know if that was a thing in the 80s, but you're right. Like with the commentary that kind of updates shows, right? Like it's also the other side of it where these were all kids shows, right? Marvel Universe, Star Wars was made for kids, right? And He-Man was a kid show in the 80s, but now you have all these adults that are in their 30s and 20s.
Yeah, man.
And we're all like, we want more of this stuff that we loved as a kid, but we want it to age with us. I think this is kind of that He-Man transformation to age with its audience, and it's not like, well, Skeletor's just there to fight He-Man. It's like Austin Powers. Like, what do you do if you actually kill him now? It's like, I have a gun in my room. We can kill him right now.
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? So, like, I did think the aspects of the fight stuff was cool update. Like you said, the animation was fantastic. They even, like, there was total MCU homages there with, like, Hulk, jumping and smashing when he was kind of mindless. I also loved when He-Man gets the sword back and he gets into the fight with the people of Eternia. That felt like, oh, this guy is a god. Like,
oh, yeah.
Like, everyone kind of took a step back as he led the charge, and you had that moment kind of like in Infinity War where Captain America and Black Panther are just running faster than everybody leading the charge.
When you talk about, like, the powers, like, seeing, you know, I want to say Grayskull, Skeletor, whatever, powered up Skeletor, like, fight the Ravage Hulk He-Man, and they still kind of, like, fell into their roles. Like, he's a sorcerer first and foremost. He still teleports, it's still hitting him, but he's stronger and he's still attacking. It was cool to see Skeletor use his powers in more than just, I'm the big bad guy and that's it, right? And then they had to work together, which I saw coming, but it was still cool to see to take on Evelyn. When we talked about, like, this show being like something for the original fans coming into this, you see all these little like secondary characters that you might have been familiar with in the, I guess, the comics or the original TV show that I wasn't into it. But we have to talk about one particular line, which just blew me away. I didn't think was going to happen. You know what I was talking about. Character Fist, though, apparently he's a character. And he's like, I'd sure like to fist him. Didn't think that would be a thing.
Talking about Skeletor.
Like killing him. But like it was funny to see that thing. And they also made a comment where Man-at-Arms and Teela were in the sewers, and they're like, oh, Pigman and Boarman, they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here. And like I know that was a direct connection to like, oh, we're getting all kinds of people from the original to make connections. So that was really fun. But my question to you, really about characters. So like this ended on the cliffhanger with Motherboard, which I don't know if that's an old character or not. But like, it absorbed Skeletor, infected Skeletor, and showed some kind of symbol. I'm assuming that's an old character or something from the He-Man lore that I'm just not familiar with. Are you informed on this at all? Do you know anything what this is?
I mean, you know me. I am an encyclopedia of absolutely useless knowledge. Yeah. So, so Motherboard is definitely an old villain. We kind of saw that weird cult in part 1 where Teela was going to like on her adventure and
like Trapper Jaw and like this weird 3-eyed guy. Yeah,
so the Motherboard is kind of like the quote-unquote god they worship, and it's like the god of technology and kind of like AI.
Okay.
And it's infected Skeletor, so it seems like that's setting up something for either a part 3 or a new season or a new series, where Skeletor might come back as like the cyborg being controlled by the Motherboard or the vessel of Motherboard. But the insignia itself is something different as well. That's a character called Hordax.
Oh.
And that is a major villain for the character She-Ra, which we did not see in the series, but She-Ra is a big character in this universe. So they may be bringing She-Ra into this.
She-Ra was the female, like, He-Man back then, right?
Yes, and she rides like the Pegasus.
Okay.
She's like basically like Wonder Woman. Like Wonder Woman and Valkyrie mixed together, kind of. And so one of her biggest bads was Hordax. So that kind of is a hint that She-Ra might be coming into this series as well later on. You know, it seems like it did well enough that like Kevin Smith is going to be able to continue to do this. Obviously, like if he's able to sneak in lines, like I'd really like to fist him into the show. Clearly, Netflix is kind of letting him do what he wants to do. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see She-Ra. Hordax is kind of like more of a like dark wizardy type. And it's going to be interesting because this series is definitely devised, I think, the fan base still.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of like old school 80s people who are like, I just want my He-Man fighting Skeletor every episode. And it's like, what about character development? And it's like,
what about Bella's storytelling?
Yeah, like what about not just like we're here to fight Skeletor every episode and there's no meaning?
Well, talking about like Motherboard and Skeletor, like and like this show being a comment on like old TV and old He-Man lore and changing it and throwing it against modern day ideas or storytelling. The fact that Motherboard infecting Skeletor leads me to believe it's going to be a very heavy tech based season 2, which is gonna be like tech versus magic, which is like always directly fighting against new ways. And then I guess this Hordax is behind all this. I don't really know too much about Hordax, but Skeletor does. So maybe there's some connection between Skeletor and Hordax that I don't know, because I'm not familiar with that. So seeing all of that, new age stuff fight the old magic of the old world is gonna be cool. My only question, like, it seemed in like season 1, like part 1, He-Man and Teela, there's going to be like a tease that He-Man was going to confess his love to Teela. At least that's what I thought. But we find out like that confession was like, oh, your mother is I was going to say witch, but like the magical sorceress, right? Do you think He-Man and Teela are ever going to have that romantic relationship?
I do. Okay. I think it's teased so long. And I will say, like, if you watch Kevin Smith movies, one of the things he's best at is like making you fall for his female characters, right? If you watch Zack and Miri Make a Porno, Elizabeth Banks is like so charming in that. You watch any of his films, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, he's very good at like that female character and teasing out that relationship. So when it happens, like you get that happy like 14-year-old boy joy. And
I love that joy.
Yes, I think this is going to be right up your alley too, where you're like, come on, I want them together, because you had that last scene too with them, and like, you know, Adam's back as Prince of Eternia, he's back as He-Man.
Yeah.
Teela's the sorceress in her own way. I like that they're not, you know, keeping her in Castle Grayskull, and she's like, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want.
The reasoning was because of the power of friendship and love. I can just do whatever I want.
Literally, it became like old animes where it's like,
I just
through the power of friendship, I can beat this guy who's trained his whole life.
You know, when Evelyn blew up heaven, right? Like, let's not forget about that. She blew up heaven.
She killed heaven, people.
Which I thought, like, was the power of Grayskull came from, like, him in that heaven. I thought the reasoning was going to be because, like, oh, like, I'm going to remake everything, including the rules, because heaven's no longer there, or, like, the establishment's not there, and she could do that. Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen with heaven. I know the powers of He-Man and the whole lore of how that power works and being a conduit, whether he calls down power or uses the sword to tamper it down. Maybe there's like a Super Saiyan 2 version of He-Man where he doesn't need the sword, he can use it and control it and become even stronger, like we saw when he was like the Hulk He-Man. I'm excited for season 2. I don't know if this show has turned me into a genuine He-Man fan. This has definitely turned me into a fan of this series, and I want to see how this goes. Maybe by the end of season 2, I'm going to say, yeah, I love He-Man. And we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they go forward. I thought this was an okay series. It wasn't the best. It wasn't terrible in my view, as a lot of people thought. But I think one of the characters I really want to see moving forward is Evil Lynn. Now that she's kind of dropped the evil, right? It's more just Lynn now. We see at the end she leaves her magic staff like in the grass, kind of like going to live in almost like Wanda at the end of WandaVision, where she's escaping all of that. Someone's gonna find that staff, number one. Then number two, I thought part 2 kind of shifted the focus to her backstory,
which was cool,
and the trauma of her backstory, and Skeletor being the one that saved her, and kind of her figuring out like what a lot of people I think feel today, where it's like, what is all this for? Yeah. Whether it's societal, whether she was the only one asking the big questions. Like, she got that glimpse into the universe, and it's like, we mean absolutely nothing. And she's like, why am I like listening to this guy who's after one person, which means nothing in the grand scheme of anything?
Exactly.
So her kind of, you know, maximum view, her macro view of the entire universe, I thought was one of the most interesting aspects of this show.
Yeah.
I hope they get to see that going forward, where like, I agree with you. I hope it's not just diluted by the power of friendship and hope has overpowered evil. And it's like, we have all these legitimate societal questions.
I mean, I don't think so, only because I know, like, Teela did say, hey, like, this scene that you saw, it's terrible. Keep watching. There's hope and magic in the universe, showing her the light side of stuff. So, like, the point of everything in the universe is, like, to create, to, like, enjoy. Like, I don't kind of know, but, like, they also mentioned...
not think about it.
Yes, but they also mentioned, like, they saw the god at the beginning of time died, and I guess that's the bird and the snake.
Yeah.
And maybe we're going to get more to, like, the god side of things, like what exactly that means. I don't really know, but all I do know is that we both had a fun time. We want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you thought of He-Man? What do you thought of Masters of the Universe, Revelations Part 2, Part 1, the whole first season? Let us know down there.
And guys, thanks so much for watching. Give us a thumbs up, like. It really helps the channel out a lot. If you're new, subscribe, turn on those notifications. You don't want to miss any more of our coverage of Masters of the Universe or anything else. And as always, you can find everything on the channel if you missed something there. And as always, my name is Chris Heller. That is Rob Moran. We are the Jersey Comic Crew, and we'll see you next time.